Hey everyone, welcome to Pittsburgh.NET User Group. And today's topic is Soar to New Heights Dev Master Coding with GitHub Copilot. We have our seasoned speaker, Randy Pagels. He's a regular. He has done a few talks with our group. And here we go. Hey Randy, welcome to the group.
Bala, thank you.
Thank you for taking time, and let's get started. The stage is yours.
All right, thank you. I don't know, we have 1 hour?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So, hey, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining and spending the next hour with me. My name is Randy Pagels. I'm a DevOps Architect, a trainer over at Xebia. I'm based out of North Detroit, Michigan, Eastern time zone. So same time zone as Bali mentioned. I've done a few talks with your group before. Today's topic is Copilot. I like presentations that are interactive. If you have questions, please come off mute, ask. If you want, put your questions in the chat. Be happy to get to the questions as well. My goal is to go through a few pro tips and some use cases using Copilot, show you a few things, etc. So let's go ahead and get started with what this is all about. Even if you're a seasoned Copilot user or new to Copilot, I would hope to be able to show you some new things. So first thing I want to do is talk about Copilot itself. A couple kind of set the stage. I never like to assume anything in an audience. I'm going to make sure we start at square one. We crawl, walk, run on the topic. So hey, what is it? What is GitHub Copilot? As you know, there's many different Copilots out there in the world. Microsoft has tagged everything with Copilot. I'm here to talk about GitHub Copilot, which is a developer assistant tool. It is a Copilot to assist you with coding tasks. So if you think about Copilot itself, it's using AI to drive task suggestions, code completions, comments to code, things like that. Copilot really helps us focus on business value versus the mundane boilerplate type of code that we're used to writing, right? We context switch all the time. So idea is stay heads down and work in Copilot and stay in Copilot and focus on the business value itself, which of course helps us stay in a flow. We're not context switching over to Stack Overflow or some other tool, Reddit, to look for different code snippets or examples that we can adopt for our own purposes. Keep in mind that, again, the large language models that Copilot uses was trained on millions and millions, tens of millions of public repos and developers' code. So it knows code really well. Ultimately, hey, as a developer, again, I use Copilot all the time. I want to be happy. Developer happiness is usually like the #1 goal we hear from customers as far as what they want to accomplish using Copilot. Productivity, of course, is one of those, but happiness is another one. And just very basics, how do you get started? You definitely need a GitHub account. You do not have to have your source code in GitHub, but you do need a GitHub account. You also need a license. And we'll talk about licensing in just a second. And of course, you need to support one of the IDEs that's supported. So that could be any of, again, the extensions that are part of the IDEs. You may use Copilot from the command line as well. So that's another option. Currently, the supported IDEs are this. There's the Visual Studio Pro Enterprise. What's unique about the Visual Studio is it doesn't not need extensions. The Copilot itself is baked into the product when it's compiled and built. So it's a very interesting. Anything new updates, you'll get an update from Visual Studio. Visual Studio Code uses extensions, as does NeoVim, JetBrains, IntelliJ, Azure Data Studio. These extensions are auto-updated, so that is a nice thing. And all new features or fixes come from Copilot, GitHub Copilot. They do come out in Visual Studio Code first. So if you are a VS Code user, that is a good thing. You will see everything first. There are 3 different license types. The individual is $10 a month. It allows you to do the basics, right? The basics of what some of the things I'll show you today. The Copilot for Business is the more common license for customers working or developers working at a company. I see a lot of that. Right today, there's about 50,000 different businesses using business licenses, and that will include many different features, which are all common with GitHub Copilot, of course, common at the IDE level. So think local repos, think your workstation. We have all the availability there. The next level is the enterprise license. They call it GitHub Copilot for enterprises. You have all the goodness you get with business, but you also get Copilot built into the GitHub.com portal. So we have it available to us in the portal itself through a browser. So now I don't need an IDE. I can actually ask and iterate over my code with Copilot inside of the .com, the browser itself. So find that very interesting. Again, I'll check the chat as well. I'll look over to the chat once in a while. So if you do have questions, please do put them in here. I tend to get on a roll and I sometimes don't check. So sorry about that. Hey, so let's talk about how it works. Copilot's all about context. It's extremely important to know when you're building a prompt using GitHub Copilot, it needs some sort of context. And that could be in the questions you ask. But the context in this example comes from your IDE. The IDE could be the tab you're on. It could be the neighboring tabs. It could be a collection of 6 or 7 tabs open of your code from your local repo you've cloned, and that becomes the context. So now when you ask Copilot a question, or you're working in your code looking for Copilot to help, Copilot, the agent itself, is going to assemble a question based on the context. And it's very important to know that that prompt that it creates gets sent over to the large language model. And before it happens to get, hit the model, of course, it's running in that model is running in a large Azure data center, but it goes through a proxy service. And the proxy service is very important. It actually scrubs the prompt that's coming from your code. It scrubs the prompt that you type in. It makes sure you don't have any, let's say, bad words or toxic language in the code itself. It will strip it for any PII you might have had, emails, phone numbers, credit card numbers, etc. It pulls those out. And also make sure, and GitHub Copilot, make sure your questions or your context has something to do with code. So I can't ask Copilot from VS Code to tell me about a movie or give me a book review, right? It has to be code relevant. Once that happens, your prompt is sent over to the large language model, and it will do its thing. This is not a session on that. We could talk about that for a whole hour. But let's just say this model is running in a data center using OpenAI. Very important thing to note here is the prompt you've built, the code you sent over, it is sent into the deleted. So it's sent into the trash. It's garbage collected at the end. And it's very important to know that you might be working on some secret proprietary code. Code is not saved. GitHub does not use it to train the next model. It doesn't go anywhere. It just gets deleted, basically. The completion that comes back out of the model, it gets sent back over back to the proxy service. Again, it's looking for code quality, making sure the code meets all security updates. So make sure it doesn't give you SQL injections or cross-site scripting type of code. Make sure that it doesn't have any toxic language in it. Of course, it's stripping it PII because all that data is coming back from public repos. So you never know what's in it, right? So it's very important. It comes back from the proxy service. Then, of course, it shows back up in your IDE. Usually it's ghosted text. You have options. I always stress this, that GitHub Copilot is your AI assistant tool, and you are the pilot. You accept the code or don't accept the code is the idea here. So now the large language model that it uses, Copilot was, if you're using inline completion, so you're in code, I can ask Copilot things right in line with the code itself. Generally has been using the GTP 3.5 Turbo. It's fast. It's less expensive to run for GitHub. It does have a limitation of 6,000 tokens, and it's also trained as of September 2021. So if you're doing things that are past that date, or asking questions about code that you know exists, or information in the world, let's say Wikipedia, beyond that date, Copilot won't be able to help you. The newer model, which is GTP 4-0, is what Copilot Chat uses. So you're using GitHub Copilot Chat. It's 10 times more powerful, 10 times faster. It also has a lot more tokens, as you can see, 128,000 tokens. And this was trained, of course, 2 years later with the model. So this is by far the more prominent engine that's basically Copilot's be driven by. So I'll just take a minute to talk about the large language model. I always like to at least break this down a little bit, how it actually works. And the idea behind this is if you're typing in a prompt, or Copilot's going to send a prompt over, what happens is that prompt gets tokenized. And it gets tokenized into its basically equivalent numerics. And that those numerics represent a word or a letter. And that whole array of numbers becomes this large array of tokens. And that whole token gets sent over to a large language model, which is a vector database. And then what they do is they use semantic kernel, semantic language to compare those and come up with the most highly probable response back to you based on the prompt. Now, this works in GitHub Copilot, ChatGPT. It's all AIs work this way. That completion comes back, and it does this in reverse. It takes the array of numbers as the completion, retokenizes it in reverse to deliver the text that you need, or the code that you need, depending on which direction we're going here. So this all happens, it's a matter of nanoseconds. So I get asked this quite a bit, is the security and trust piece is, hey, is my code, is GitHub doing something with my code? Are they saving my code? Are they using the code to train other models? And the answer is no. Your code is your data. Your code is used for the prompt only. Again, used on a large language model, comes back and gets deleted. It's never used. The prompts and suggestions are filtered for security issues, for security reasons, stripped of all PII data. There is a personal data collection that GitHub does for about 2 years, and that's collecting information such as which IDE am I using, what code language am I using, how many prompts am I asking Copilot for, how many completions do I get back from Copilot, and out of that list, you get up to 10, by the way, but out of that list, how many do I actually accept in my IDE? So that's really the data that's collected. It's not tied to any one individual or even a company for that matter. The fourth one, called the intellectual property protection. This is a switch that your GitHub admin can change. So again, I work at Xebia. I can't even change this. Ours is on. We are not allowed to use public matched intellectual property code that's copyrighted, is what this does. It stops code from being entered into your IDE that could, that was found to be possibly copyrighted. So you can't use it. Okay. So again, that's that in a nutshell. And I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple things here. So the very first thing is, you're looking at Visual Studio Code, and I don't ask Bally, can you see the Visual Studio Code IDE? Because I don't see it on the screen anymore.
I just see the demo screen, not the studio.
Oh, that's not good.
You might need to share the entire screen probably.
Yeah, let me just do that real quick. I thought I was doing that. Let me go ahead and say share screen, entire screen. I see what you're saying. Yep, I see it now. That was the problem. Now you should be able to see it, okay? I see it.
Yeah, it's all good, Randy.
Okay, thanks. So VS Code, the basics, right? We go to the extensions on the left-hand side. You type in GitHub Copilot. It's very important to have GitHub Copilot chat installed. There is a pre-release version. You could look at that if you'd like. A new thing that was added just a very short time back is the ability to customize the extension. So if you go to your GitHub Copilot chat and click the gear, and I can click on extension settings, there's an extension settings at the very top that if I could I don't want to do it that way. Sorry, we'll go back. There's an extension setting, and I forget where it's at now. That's interesting. It allows you to basically have Copilot set a profile. Say, hey, I'm a developer, or hey, I'm a business analyst, and please answer my questions in this fashion. That allows you to set this up. I'll have to look for it later. It's in the extension settings, so if you were to go through here and look. I forget where they put it now. They must have just moved it. Anyway, I'll go back out of there. So make sure that's installed. And the other thing is, GitHub Copilot chat, you'll see the little bubble on the left-hand side. That's what this is. So of course you want to make sure you're connected and logged in and authenticated to your license. And the last thing I'll show you on the right is the little icon on the lower right-hand corner called the Copilot status menu. This allows me to see if Copilot's ready. It's logged in, it's ready to communicate back to the large language model for me. If you want, for some reason, you could disable those completions as well. And there's other there's things like proxy settings and how to style Copilot, etc. So there's a bunch of settings you can check out there. But what I want to show you is a couple, just the basics of the basics. If I'm working with an aviation style themed project called based off the Wright Brothers success, and I called the Wright Brothers API. If I were a brand new developer in Copilot, Copilot's a fantastic tool to help learn and educate. If I just ask Copilot a couple things, and one of the things I wanted to show you is the ability to use @ sign. So when you click an @ in the Copilot chat window, notice I have these different agents. So it'll give you a list, right? @workspace looks through all your files, all your folders, your workspaces, etc., to create a prompt for you and help you with the prompt. It actually knows about your code. There's a VS Code extension as well, an agent. And think of that as the online documentation for Visual Studio Code. So if I wanted to ask Visual Studio Code something or figure out how to do something in code, I could just say @VS Code, ask a question. And then there's a few other ones here, GitHub itself. So if you want to find out about your code repo in your GitHub account, I can just do it at GitHub and then ask a question. Hey, has my pull request been reviewed? Something like that. So I'm going to use that workspace. And the very first thing I'm going to do is ask Copilot, what's the planes controller do? I'm supposed to be working on this as a developer. I don't know what this does. And Copilot will go through and look. If you notice what it's doing, I'll make this bigger. You'll notice it's looking for 6 references. So it's combing through the files, looking at all my different files. It's not just looking at one. And it comes up with this, it tells me that it's an API. I use different method calls to create planes and call back planes like itself. I can delete planes and so forth. But Copilot is helping me even understand this a little better. Now, nice thing is with Copilot chat, I can just click on the file and it'll open it up for me. I'll make that down a little bit more. Another thing I can do is, because Copilot now has context, for instance, I have one file open, planes controller. I have a list of planes. And those planes, of course, represent the Wright Brothers fleet in the right order, right? Wright Brother 1903, built 1904. So now that Copilot has this context, what I can do is go down to the 4th one. All I need to do is press comma and press enter, and Copilot will suggest the next plane. A couple things I want to point out is if I tab now, of course, it's, as I said, I'm the pilot. I decide if I want that code or not. And what's nice is I can just tab forward to accept the code. Notice, though, it's not only the 4th plane, because Copilot understands that this model, this plane object, has 5 properties in it. It created the 5 properties, also went out to Wikipedia to pull out the next Wright Brothers plane called Model B. So it's giving me code updates as well as historical updates. And this is from Wikipedia. So that's pretty cool. Saved me some of the boilerplate stuff. And I could stamp this out over and over again if I wanted to. Let's go like this. Let's go to the bottom. There's a couple methods in here. But if I were to say go to the bottom of this file, again, Copilot knows which methods I have already. If I just press enter, Copilot's going to suggest this HTTP put, because I don't have one, right? So Copilot's going to suggest that. And I can simply go ahead and press enter. Now, sometimes Copilot, keep this in mind, Copilot's not always accurate. It's an AI tool, so things change all the time, right? Let me go ahead and undo that real quick here. And I'm going to go like this. I'm going to say ID 7. Now what you get, a couple things, tips and tricks here. Copilot's making a suggestion for a put with an ID 7 as my tag. And what you see is the ghosted text. What you don't see, if you ever do this, hover over the first line. Remember I said the large language model will return a couple completions for you, and you have a choice. I can click these arrows and cycle through the choice. I don't like the second one, so I'm going to go to the first one. Another pro tip here is inside of VS Code, the hotkey is Control Enter. This brings up the completions pane. And the completions pane will offer multiple up to 10 different suggestions, which is great, right? As a developer now, I can pick whatever these other suggestions that I want. So that's pretty nice. I'm going to go ahead and close that, press enter, and take that suggestion there. So I could continue building out my boilerplate API controller here if I wanted to. That's one way to do it. Or maybe if I already know what I'm going to type, maybe I want an API called to count the planes. I could just type in HTTP count, press enter. Again, Copilot will offer the code for me, make it very, very simple. I can bang out these methods really fast because Copilot's helping me. Let's say I want to search for planes, though. This is called comments to code. Let's say I don't know how to decorate the API, right, or the method call. I can just simply type in search for planes by name. This is where, keep in mind, use natural language. Just ask the question as if you were describing to another developer. Hey, I want to search for planes. So Copilot offers the HTTP GET search. Great. Press enter. And Copilot will go out and pull back some code for me. So it gave me a search by name method, which is great, right? That's exactly what I wanted. Again, it's up to you to make sure this compiles and whatnot, but it's allowing me to quickly get this API method, these methods up and running in this controller. Now, another area I can use code to comments is, let's say I'm going to go up here and I'm going to add a plane. But before I add the plane, I want to make sure that if I have a bad request, like I don't want to add the same plane twice. So I want Copilot to help me with the code to return a bad request. So I can come in here and just simply type in a comment, hey, return bad request, the plane already exists, right? And Copilot will go ahead and give me some code. Now, one thing I want to point out here is the clearer you can be with your prompt, and this becomes into the prompt engineering, which we'll talk about in just a bit. I did not tell Copilot explicitly what I was looking for. So what I'm going to do is just get rid of that code and say, I want to say exist by name. You could do by name, by model, by ID. Copilot will go ahead and just adjust it. So the point is, be very clear with what you're asking Copilot to help you with, and it does a pretty good job. Another area is Copilot learns your style of coding. So if I were typing comments, I was creating READMEs or documentation, Copilot does a pretty good job with that as well. Right now, I use Logger. So when I go into one of my methods, I use Logger. So and I want to log the parameters. So if I go down to the plane here and I start typing in Logger, Copilot will go ahead and help me. It's going to think for a minute, or maybe not today. It's not doing what it's supposed to do today. So let's try this again. We'll try another one. I'll come here, type in Logger. So again, Copilot is trying to assist me. It's not doing it accurately today. Normally it would insert the actual parameter going into the method call here. So for some reason that's not working today, so that's okay. We'll skip that for now. Get rid of that as well. I wanted to show you one more workspace command here too, is a couple things. Documentation. These are some of the basic low-hanging fruit here. If I wanted to document just this method, which is my recommendation, by the way, you can do it one of two ways or one of three ways. I can simply right-click. Because of the extension, I can click on the Copilot menu item and say, generate docs. If you generate docs, and this is called inline docs, and it generates the docs for you, it puts it at the header of the method. Now, if that's what you want, that's great. I don't want that, so I'm going to say discard. And when you discard, it doesn't always get it right. So I usually Control Z and undo the documentation here. Keep that in mind. It doesn't come out as clean using the inline. Oops, I got rid of too far. Here we go. Like this. There we go. Put it back where it was. Another way is hotkey. I could Control I. That's called inline. You can code, you can create unit tests, etc. in line. Again, I don't recommend it personally. It's using a ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo. And personally, as a developer, I like to review my code first. So I'm going to come over to the chat window and do the same thing. Now, another pro tip here is remember the token count. If you don't clear this window, every time I issue a prompt to Copilot chat, it collects the previous chat with it. So if you go to the very top, there's a plus sign. You just click the plus sign and clear the chat. And if you want to see previous chats, I can click the clock and pull out previous chats with all the different values that were here. So my new chat is, I'm going to go like this and say a couple tricks here. I'm going to ask Copilot to document all my code for, and I could say this, remember context. This means the code file that's open. This could mean what's highlighted. If you want Copilot to be laser focused on something that you're asking a question about, use the hashtag. Don't use this. Use for hashtag selection. Selection focuses Copilot in the code window for the highlighted code. And then I can press enter. And what you'll see is on the left-hand side, Copilot not only documents the header, puts in lines of code here as well, or sorry, it puts in documentation for the lines of code that I have. Very simple. So depending on the style you like, you have choices. Now, how do I get this code over to the window? I have a few options here. I could use the magic icon called Apply in Editor. So because I have my code highlighted in my editor, Copilot Chat will just insert it here. I could also click the next icon, which just says Insert at Cursor. So Insert at Cursor, of course, overwrites it like that. And now I have my code documented. I could do the same thing for, let's say, shortcut key. We haven't talked about those yet, but those are coming up soon. I could do something like this. I could do a slash command, which are called shortcut keys. If I do this inline, and I do a control I, if I just type in slash, it'll show me the list of slash commands. These are shortcut keys to documenting. These are shortcut keys to explain my code or run tests. I don't think it's sharing anymore, is it? There we go. I'm going to get out of this out of here. So what I would recommend you do is go back to the Copilot chat window, and you have the same shortcut keys. If you type in slash, you can see the list of code options you have. So I have explain. I could explain that code. What is this thing doing? Copilot's fantastic to help train and explain things. It tells me what this get by ID is doing in great detail. I could also say slash tests. Hey, I want to generate tests. And Copilot will go ahead and generate a unit test for me based on that code. And again, as a developer, it's my job to take this code, maybe insert it into my testing harness. I'm using XUnit, so I have the right test here. I could also just say, hey, insert this into a new file and let me create a brand new testing framework here if I wanted to. So those are a couple of tips and tricks there that you could use. Okay, so let's, I'm going to go back to slides real quick, cover a few more things. I'll come back and do some more demos. Hopefully, the video, yeah. I think Bali fixed that, Lance. Hopefully he did. Okay, let's talk about agents. Agents in
Hey, Randy.
Copilot. Yes.
There is one question. You want to take it now, or you want to take it at the end?
Oh, I can take it now. Yeah, I'm looking by Brent. Can it build Selenium web end to end? I would say yes, it can. Brent, I've used it for Playwright. I've used it to build UI tests, and Playwright does a really good job with that. I can only imagine, I can only assume it'll do a great job with Selenium as well. So I would recommend give that a try.
Thank you.
Yep. Let's just talk about the agents real quick here. So these agents, again, this varies from IDE to IDE. So if you're using Visual Studio or IntelliJ or something different, just keep that in mind. But in VS Code, The at workspace is probably the most powerful agent. It allows you to comb through, look at all your files, anything relevant to code that you're asking the question on. So if I said, hey, is this, how do I log into this application? Or where's the front end file so I can write some UI automation for this? Copilot can help you with that. If you're communicating with Azure related topics, there's an Azure related agent. If you have that installed, it's an extension. If I'm talking to GitHub, my account, hey, is my pull request ready for review? Or did the pull request find errors? Or whatever the question is, you use @GitHub. Again, it directs Copilot to talk to GitHub. And then there's an @terminal in VS Code, which is like online as well. The other commands I started showing you a little bit, just a little bit, were the / commands. So these are shortcut keys. There's inline, and then there's Copilot chat. Again, I use Copilot chat for almost everything. I hardly do anything inline. You get a much better experience if you're working with chat because of the engine it's using. So /explain if you're new to the code base, or you've inherited code, or maybe you're new to the team. You can highlight code. You can explain the entire code base. You can explain just a specific file or function. I use it all the time. Create unit tests. I'm going to show you a trick about creating more accurate unit tests. I feel like that's an area that could be improved. Another thing, I'm a .NET C# programmer, so you get red squigglies, you get some Stack Overflow or exception errors in your terminal. You can use /fix, which is really awesome. So /fix can help you with not only explaining what's wrong, but probably gives you suggestions on what to do to fix it too. And then there's the scaffolding in a brand new project called /new. So if you wanted to create a brand new project, hey, create a .NET, you can say, hey, @workspace /new, create this Blazor application that has unit tests and has some Selenium tests and so forth and so on. Just use natural language, describe what you want, and Copilot will generate scaffold out this entire project for you with some basic skeletal code, if you will. So / commands are there. If you ever need to know what's available, just hit / and you'll see. The next area I'll say is the core is the hashtags. So hashtag commands are really powerful as well. Hashtag file. If you're talking about a file, for instance, I could say, I'm going to create unit tests for this method, hashtag selection. And I want this test to look just like the ones over in hashtag file, xunit, fluent assertions, or whatever I'm using. Point Copilot to the right file so it has a reference. It's like you're referencing something. Okay, so that's awesome. Hashtag file selection, hashtag editor. If you're asking Copilot about something about a command in Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code or a menu item, something to do with the context of Visual Studio, you can use the hashtag editor. And then there's Git, so Git commands, right? If you're running an application of VS Code and it breaks and you don't know why, you could highlight the entire dump inside a terminal and then ask Copilot to help me fix it. And you say hashtag terminal selection. And Copilot will focus itself onto the terminal selection. So these are important hashtag commands. Prompt engineering also, you may have heard that. It's not just a buzzword, but prompt engineering is really important to get the concept down. Again, I use this daily, and I use it in VS Code for code. I also use it in ChatGPT all the time. How you ask the question determines the high quality completion you may or may not get back from the large language model. So this is very, very useful for code completions as well. I can show you a really good example of this as well. Think of this as a quote my friend Jennifer here, the art of coaxing the best possible result out of the large language model. The reason this is important is because the large language model is not intelligent. It doesn't remember anything. So you have to ask the question in such a way to get better results. And I always say iterate over that and try it again. Here's a couple examples. So one of the concepts of prompt engineering is called zero-shot prompting, which basically means I'm just asking a straight up question. Hey, write a C# program with looks like a simple calculator with basic operations. There's no other context for Copilot to go on. You're asking a simple question. Again, that's called zero-shot. The next step would be called one-shot, or maybe even few-shot. You're asking Copilot a question. Again, take a step back from this example, but if you're asking Copilot a question, you're giving Copilot an example. In this example, I'm saying I need a C# model for this flight log signature property. And I'm also saying, here's an example. I have letters, numbers, and hyphens. This is what it looks like. And then below that, I actually spell out what the letters, numbers, and hyphens are. And what this is a kind of this is a code for the Wright Brothers on their airfields that they basically did their test flights on. And that's called the flight log signature property. So I was just asking a Copilot to, hey, here's what I mean. Here's what I mean by that, by the way. So let's look at a few more things here. And then we're going to jump into a couple other areas. Let me go back to, where is VS Code? Where'd you go, VS Code? Here we go. A couple more examples here I want to show. I'm going to show you a couple things that are kind of off the rails here. I thought it would be cool to show it to you. So if I close all my windows, I have nothing open. Remember, context. Nothing's open. There's no context. I could ask Copilot something like this. I could say, hey, hopefully you can see that okay. I don't know. If you can, I can go like this. I think someone said the window is blocked or something. I'll go like that. Hopefully if you can see that. I'm asking Copilot to generate a complete README file describing my entire application. You could actually ask Copilot to document the entire app by using @workspace. Now, I don't usually show this very much because I want to just give it a try anyway. It is creating a README file based on the project itself, and it goes on and on and on with hyperlinks, etc. So if you ever wanted to document your application, it's a pretty cool way to do this. It makes it great for a README. Anyway, that was pretty cool. Another thing I want to show you is I showed you the planes controller and we added planes, but wouldn't it be nice to see an image of the plane itself? So I'm going to go to the file. I'm going to go to the models file and pull up the planes model. And what I'm going to do is simply add a string for image URL. Oops, URL. Make this fast, go like this. Oops. So I've added an image URL to the model. Now, keep this in mind. This is the tab I'm keeping open because of the context. So now when I go back to the planes controller, it's on a separate tab, right? If I scroll back up, would it be really cool if Copilot would understand the context of my open files, which it does, and I can just simply go to a plane, type in comma, press enter, and image URL is put there automatically. Copilot knows the context of the planes. It knows that I have 5 of the 6 properties. It's saying, well, you probably want image URL next because it doesn't exist. And I can simply press tab. Notice it goes out to Wikipedia and pulls out a flyer, a JPEG, which is just a placeholder, by the way. It's not real. Same thing with this other one. I can go like this. Now, if I had a list of 100 planes, that would be a pain in the butt to do this. So let me show it to you the Copilot way. Get rid of that. I'm going to actually delete the 4th plane, make this a little more challenging. And what I can do is use prompt engineering to actually, or use a prompt to better fill this out. So I'm going to go like this. I'm going to highlight the list of planes, and I'm going to use inline. I could do it either way, but I'm just going to use inline this time. I'm going to press Control-I and ask Copilot. I want to ask Copilot to add the image URL property to each plane for me, and then go ahead and add the next 2 additional planes to complete the fleet. So now Copilot has to know about the properties of the plane model. It also is going out to Wikipedia to figure out what planes 4 and 5 are going to be. When I press enter, you'll see it go ahead and add the image URL to the planes, and then it goes ahead and adds a plane number 4 and 5 as well. So again, think big. If you had a whole list, it's much, much faster. So again, that's just using a prompt. The prompt is here. Okay. All right, let's go to another area. Let's go like this. I'm going to go ahead and close this now. That I guess I could just accept it, right? Yeah, accept it. That sounds good. So I've accepted the planes. Now I have a list. I'm going to go ahead and close this. Looks like I got something wrong with it, but that's okay. I'm going to close it. Close that. What I started demoing, whatever, 20 minutes ago, I had an existing planes controller. Now, I want to show you another area here. I have an airfield class. This airfield class simply defines, again, the locations and the names of the areas that the Wright brothers used for building and testing their planes. And it's called airfields. They didn't have airports back then. So wouldn't it be cool to have a controller for this, right? As you can see in my folder, I don't have any controllers for the airfields themselves. So we're going to use Copilot to help me with this. So I'm going to call up Copilot chat. I can actually close this window now and go like this. I can go ahead and say, hey, at workspace, use the airfield class and create the API controller with all the CRUD operations and add test data for the first 3 airfields used by the Wright brothers. There's a couple ways to do this. This is the easiest way. I'm going to get to your question in just a minute, Brent. This is the most straightforward way to ask the question, by just asking Copilot to go ahead and create this class, create this this controller, and you'll see it does a pretty good job creating the controller. Now, there's probably a few things missing there, but it probably gets me 80–90% of the way there. And it even gives me some test data I can actually test this out with. But if I scroll back up, I'll let the screen catch up here. If I scroll back up, you'll notice it created this airfield controller, gave me the using statements. And all I need to do is simply say, hey, yeah, this looks good. Let's insert this into a new file. I can Control-S and save the file and put it in my controller folder like this. And I can call airfield controller.cs. And what's nice, I mean, I so fast created this whole controller. I could actually highlight it if I wanted to and say, hey, now generate unit tests for these as well. If I wanted to, I could do that as well. I want to show you one more way to do this. This is using some of the prompts I talked about. I talked about hashtags of hash files, etc. So what you can do is go like this and say, using the airfield class. Airfield class, you can say hashtag file. When you type in hashtag file, it opens up the file dialog at the top, and I can say airfield class, and you'll notice it inserts it into the prompt. And I can say for the first 3 airfields, etc., it should produce the same thing or roughly the same thing, which for the sake of argument, it does. And notice when I said I need the first 3 airfields, it pulls out Kitty Hawk, Huffman Prairie, etc. So it actually added that test data, which is nice. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and another thing I can do is, I don't know if I have this here or not. Let me see something. Give me 1 second. I'm going to grab a... I mentioned we haven't talked about unit testing yet, but I wanted to show that. Let me go back to the slides real quick. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour here. I want to make sure I show you as many things as I can. Brent, you had a question. Have you re-edited so many times that it somehow lost certain parts of updating Copilot? Are you referring to the completions weren't working correctly? Like longer? If you are, I don't know if I can't hear you if you're talking, but if you are saying that, that's exactly why. I've worked with Copilot probably hundreds and hundreds of times, and it gets so used to me doing what I'm doing, it starts falling to the wayside. It shouldn't happen that way, but it does. Copilot just kind of adapts itself. Not each iteration of new code. I'm not sure quite following what you're asking, Brent. Sorry. It says, have you re-edited so many times that it somehow lost certain parts of updating Copilot? If you could elaborate or come off mute, I don't know if you're allowed to do that on this call or not. Copilot will lose context if you don't iterate. So I always recommend iterate over your code and keep the chat alive. Don't clear it, and Copilot will remember what you're looking for. Another area I'd like to cover, which is the basics of the basics, is unit testing. So unit testing is, there's all kinds of challenges with unit testing, of course, right? Is a lot of developers don't like to write unit tests. It's difficult to write unit tests. It's time consuming to write unit tests. It's very repetitive. So Copilot can help us and enhance unit testing itself, basically suggesting some use cases that you may not have thought of, or edge cases. Lee, I have not used Copilot for TDD before, but I don't see any reason that it wouldn't work. You could just start asking Copilot to create a test. Just ask Copilot backwards for TDD. I've not tested that out myself. I've done a lot with Copilot, but not that one. That's a good one. Again, using Copilot to enhance your unit testing, it does excel, and it does excel really well if you stay within small segments of code. Try not to do the whole file, stick to some specific methods, and do it that way. One of the demos here I'm going to show you is, and I keep some of these in the slides as well, is you can use, let's say, the flights controller and ask Copilot to generate tests for a specific file. And Copilot will do that. It'll generate the test just like I showed you earlier. But there's a couple other ways you can do this. If you don't give Copilot the context, it's just going to create tests. So you have to get specific with it being Copilot. So you can ask Copilot to generate all the tests based on a selection. So we can do a selection of code and then generate unit tests to make sure they match. And I'll show you that. And it will come out looking better, a lot better. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll show you that as well. So just keep in mind to take away smaller unit testing. And I left this in a slide deck as well. What it looks like is this. You highlight your piece of code, and on the right, number one, highlight the function or highlight the method. And then number two, in the GitHub Copilot chat window, I'm going to say, hey, generate all the unit test scenarios for hashtag selection, which laser focuses it back on my get by ID. And then I say hashtag file, make the test match the style in hashtag file. And then the file dialog comes up. And then you just pick for me, it's plain controllers tests, which has all my other X unit tests sitting there. So what Copilot will do is generate the test based on that exact style, which is what you want. Which is really nice, right? So let's go look at that real quick. I know I'm going to run out of time, but hopefully I gave you lots of demos here. I'm going to show you that real quick. If I go to, let's say, I'll just pick on Planes Controller again.
Randy, we have one question from Lee.
Okay. Oh, yes, from Lee. Will it not just generate unit tests for what you've written, not the expected behavior? You have to, it will write unit tests, Lee. If you just ask Copilot to write a unit test like this, I could just, let me, it's actually easier to show you what I want. So if I just grab this file here, if I just highlight the code, then I go to Copilot chat and say, hey, Copilot, write a unit test for this. I'll say this. Right there, Copilot is making an assumption based on the context of the whole file that you probably want an X unit test. But again, the more detailed you are about the test, the more accurate your unit test will be. So again, Copilot did a pretty good job of writing a unit test, and I didn't give it any context whatsoever. Right? So this time it worked out well. Another way to do it is like this. Highlight the code. Again, I strongly recommend trying this. You can ask Copilot to generate all the test scenarios for the selection. And you want your tests to match the style in this file, which I'm going to say hashtag file. And it's the, where'd it go? It's called plain controller test file, because you have a style of unit testing. So let Copilot know about it by giving it a hashtag file. And then I said, use the existing list of planes for test data, because the context is the file that's open. So look at this prompt here in the lower left corner. It's very specific. Generate all unit test scenarios. I could try attempt to do it like this. I could, this is one example. So if I actually, let me show it to you two different ways. If I go ahead and press enter, Copilot will do that. It will explain what it's going to do, give me a plan, give me the code. It also gives me all the code, which maybe you don't want. I don't know. If I clear that and do it a different way, I could do something like this. I'm going to say, hey, Copilot, create all the unit tests, including the edge cases for this call, for hashtag selection. Again, laser focus on the selection, and I'm using few assertions in X unit. I'm giving Copilot a little more to go on. And again, it did a pretty good job creating 1, 2, 3, 4 unit tests for me. And it did X unit influence assertions as well, which is cool. I would insert this into a new file. I'd compile it. I'd run my test, make sure it works. If nothing else, takeaway is you get 80, 90% of the way there. You might have to tweak it still and make sure, it works a little bit, but it gets you pretty far along the way, which is pretty nice. All right. One more thing I think I have time to show you. Speaking of unit testing, if I go in, let me go ahead and get rid of this, clear that. I'm going to open up a new file. I guess I need Planes Controller too. Sorry. Yeah, let's go back to Planes Controller. Where to go? Here we go. I could, where's this at? Planes post. I lost my search for name. I wonder where I put that. Oh, it's down there. Okay. Let me just move something real quick. I need this set up. Otherwise this won't work. Let me go like this. What I wanted to show you was a way to use prompt engineering to set up unit tests, which is pretty cool too. So I can highlight my code like this, go to Copilot chat, and do something like this. I'm actually asking Copilot to generate all my unit tests for the selection, for the hashtag selection, and I'm giving Copilot 4 different scenarios. So you can create unit tests in bulk. I want to test it for a specific text called Wright Brothers 3, a specific search, lowercase search, extra spaces search. And when I do this, Copilot will go ahead and generate all the different tests that match basically the scenario. So keep that in mind. Again, this is prompt engineering is what this is. We're just using a prompt to give it some ideas, basically. All right, I know I have a couple minutes left, so let me see if there's anything else in the slide deck I wanted to show you before we leave here. A couple things on troubleshooting. And this won't be a demo. I'll just show it to you. So we talked about unit testing. We talked about the basics, and I know I have just a few extra minutes here. Gregory, I'll get to you just 1 second here. No, go ahead. Sorry. Did you have a question, Gregory, or?
No, I think he's just saying hi.
Oh, hi. Okay. Okay. My last 2 minutes here. Troubleshooting. I covered a lot of the basics. Troubleshooting is also one of those things we run into as developers. We have things that don't work. We have exception handling problems. We have, troubleshooting. So keep that in mind. Copilot does a really good job of refactoring, fixing things, making things more performant, helping to explain, break down complex problems. It does a great job with all these things. So for instance, I may have a piece of code. I have a terminal window that has a dump, right? This is a failure for whatever reason. And this is just, let's say, complicated. I look at this and say, I don't understand this at all. I can highlight it and ask Copilot to help me explain it to me. And actually even say the prompt here is hashtag terminal selection. What's wrong with the performance? How do I fix this error? You can ask the question however you want to ask it, but the key here is terminal selection. Select the dump in the terminal and then ask questions. Same thing with refactoring. Code's too complex. Hey, help me refactor this. Code's too slow. Hey, Copilot, help me make this more reliable or faster, more performant, more readable, maintainable, etc. So. But we are at time, correct, Bali? I want to make sure I respect everybody's time tonight.
Yeah, we can go a little bit, like we started a few minutes late, so it's fine if you want to cover something. 5-10 minutes should be good.
10 more minutes.
Yeah.
Then I'll cover something that's really important. Chain of thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I talked about prompt engineering. Remember, there's the one-shot prompt, which is just asking a question. Then there's zero shot, which is asking a question with an example. The third one is called chain of thought. And this is super powerful. Chain of thought prompting allows you to create these complex reasoning through better asks, grouping things together, complex tasks. So let me give you an example. In this example of our aviation aerodynamics. So let's say we have an aerodynamic sequence that the Wright Brothers flew. Let's just say, pretend for a minute. The very top of the prompt is parse an aerobatic sequence signature property into a C# model. I'm giving Copilot these hashtag aerobatic sequence examples. So here's some examples of letters, numbers, and hyphens that mean something we don't know. They're encoded, right? I'm explaining to Copilot what the maneuver looks like. Maneuvers are, an L stands for loop, an H is a hammerhead, an R roll, S is a spin, tail spin. And then I'm giving Copilot some specific bulleted instructions. The number represents the count, the letter represents the difficulty, and so forth and so on. You just break down the problem into these manageable pieces for Copilot and put this into a prompt. And then I'm giving it specific instructions that the way scoring works. Hey, we do a roll, we do a loop, double score, spin, etc. And then what Copilot will do is again, chain of thought reasoning. So I'm giving it an example. Say, hey, Copilot, now here's an example. Let me do the math for you, right? Here's an example of the sequence. Here's the math behind the sequence. And the number in this example will always calculate out to 22. What Copilot will do, again, this is the entire prompt, by the way. This is one prompt. And the takeaway here is when you create a prompt, let's say you're up at the whiteboard talking to your peers, you're describing a problem. Here's the steps we're going to go through. You do the same thing with Copilot. Describe the steps, ask Copilot in groups, group-like things together, and then Copilot will go ahead and produce the code for you. And it actually does a really good job of creating this class for me. And then when we actually run this, we call the API, we pass in a sequence, it will calculate that out to 22. And the takeaway of this is think step by step. If you want to know more about prompt engineering, let's say this intrigues you, by all means, go out to promptingguide.ai. All the concepts I talked about are explained there. All right. So prompt engineering is a really important concept, whether it's chain of thought or not. Just keep your prompts going. Another tidbit I'll give you, and we'll close it out here. I'll give you the last tidbit here is my final thoughts. If you set clear goals on what Copilot can help you understand, be very detailed in your asks, use natural language, just ask the questions, type in the comments. Copilot does a really good job there. And refine through feedback, meaning iterate over that. If Copilot gives you something, you can highlight it and ask the question again, or ask the question why, or ask the question whatever, make a change something differently. The don'ts, don't rely on AI blindly. You want to accept something, but verify. So AI is not always right. It's not the end all be all. It's an assistant. It helps you provide coding assistance only. Again, I don't rely on it heavily. I use it for demos and whatnot, but it's important to do that. And then typical use cases, I've used the Copilot for everything from boilerplate code, data generation, creating PowerShell scripts, creating interaction with Docker files, containers, deploying to Azure, infrastructure as code, generating automated tests, whether they're unit tests. I use Playwright. I used to use Selenium, but I've used Playwright now. I use TypeScript. I've done it C#. And also, I didn't talk about is Copilot does a really good job with language translations. So if you have a Terraform example, I can convert it to ARM or Bicep. If you have a C# example, convert it to Python or Go or Ruby. It does a really good job converting code. So that is the ultimate takeaway here. If you want one of my Copilot talks here, I do have it on my github.com/PagelsR. Under talks, there's a repo called talks. A similar, not exact, but a similar slide deck exists there for Copilot. I believe you can find it there. If not, you can hit up Bally and he can figure out, we can figure out how to get this to you. So I know I'm at the end of time. I want to thank everybody for spending the hour with me. It was great. Hopefully you got a little gold nugget out of the Copilot talk tonight. And I'll turn it back over to Bally. So thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you, Randy. Thanks everyone for joining us. And just a reminder here, we are part of the .NET Foundation, and we are Pittsburgh.NET User Group. And we are hosting meetups every month, bringing good presenters like Randy, good topics. And I would, if there is any questions, feel free to find it. Just seeing there. Oh, thank you, Lance.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions, but you have the socials of Randy. You can always reach out to him.
Yep. You can
Thank
find
you
me on
all for
LinkedIn.
joining us. It's been a pleasure, Randy, hosting you.
It's been a pleasure, everyone. Thanks, Bala.
Yep, thank you.
Have a good rest of your night. Yep.
Thanks, everyone.